Hi, everyone. Welcome to this interview with Blaine Bailey of In the Weeds. I'm just going to read a short description about Blaine's company. In the Weeds was set up in Colorado. Blaine was inspired to set up this charity from his own experiences as a chef and also from the experiences of his close friends and colleagues. They provide resources and opportunities to build healthier individual lifestyles and a healthy community with a strong focus on really speaking out about the challenges that affect our industry, especially mental health and work-life balance and lots of other things. And I just want to say thank you very much for being here and doing this interview.
Oh, I'm excited to be here, and thanks for having me. So,
Thank you. And as usual, I always start by setting a context. I wanted to do these interviews with other other platforms in this industry that are doing work to support hospitality, just to bring about a conversation about work-life balance because we don't talk about it enough as a problem. Um, it affects all areas of our life, but we kind of ignore how it affects us. And it's kind of like the elephant in the room. And if you're an employee, you think that okay, my rota plays a role in it. It determines how much time I have to look after myself. Whereas if you're the employer, you might worry about it weakening the team work ethic, or that it yeah, it sort of takes away from the importance of the work. But the truth is that it's really important to consider work-life balance and how, unless your team are happy and healthy, they just, how they show up in the kitchen or on the floor. um, it's going to affect everything, every aspect. And also, we have to add to this, we have a culture, at least a kitchen culture, which says that it's all about the work and nothing else. We don't matter as much. So I feel all these things bring about a very confused response from all of us in the industry, and I want these conversations and your insights to sort of um, to to really speak to what the challenge is, and from different viewpoints. It's not just mine, but different viewpoints and your experiences
right.
in your community as well. So with that, I wanted to ask you, what was your journey to creating In the Weeds?
So it was a lot of the work-life balance. Starting out with, uh, I came from also the South and America, like Arkansas, these southern states, the southern culture, which is very similar to kitchen culture of just, you work, you work, and your own personal life is put aside. So that's kind of the work ethic I grew up in. Um, and so whenever I became a sous chef in 2013, and I was already working 70, 80 hours a week just to make the pay, but then as sous chef, I was doing that same amount of time, if not more. And that was just the culture. That was what I signed up for. That was expected, and there wasn't any way out of this. Is the hashtag chef life, and I continued on that, and it was detrimental to a relationship that I was in, a serious relationship, and also my substance use habits, primarily alcohol, um, and then even my physical health. It began to deteriorate, which I didn't find out till later on. And you just kind of powered through the pain, through a lot of that. And one summer, so we're in Durango, Colorado. We're a seasonal town where summertime's our busy season. And I had lost one of my prep chefs to overdose, and it was a pretty big hit to all of us. He was a big part of the community as well. Had grown up here in the town, and amazing, one of those typical situations where you wouldn't know anything was wrong. He's the happiest person, and so that was a big hit. And meanwhile, he's now my co-founder of In the Weeds. Uh, he was working for me, and he was getting his degree in social work and counseling and everything. And we had talked about it after this situation, and it's like therapy for chefs, man. And we kind of laughed it off like, oh, that'll ever happen. No one, that self-destructive mentality that plagues our industry or has plagued our industry in the past. And, we brushed it off and a couple of years went by and I lost a big relationship, got heavier into alcohol and realized that this was not sustainable, that I wasn't going to make it. I was getting burnt out and tired, exhausted all the time. So I decided to take a break from management, not necessarily from cooking, but went and kind of went out to do some farm to table work in Wisconsin and learn, just I was working 30 hours a week. So it was like being on vacation, and um, and kind of that's whenever I started thinking about like what does our industry need. The chef I was working for, we were doing this work study program. She was an amazing influence. It's like how do we save the world through food? And that's where we started. I started breaking it down in my house, and I'd been sober for 40 plus days at that point, and kind of going crazy. And all right, what do I do? What do I do? And so started building this idea like, well, we're in the industry of taking care of others, but yet in order to help other people, we need to be able to help ourselves and take care of ourselves before we can even do that. And so that came down to the basis of it. And ironically, coincidentally enough, the chef, the counselor, we hadn't talked in probably a year and a half, 2 years. And he called me while I'm staring at my wall, covered with all this ideas and how we do this. And he called me. He's like, "Hey, man, I was thinking about what we talked about therapy for chefs a couple of years ago, and he's like, I got my own practice now, and I'd really like to see if we can get something going, whether it's workshops or groups or whatever." I'm sitting there like, yeah, that's same page. So we decided I decided to move back to Durango from Wisconsin and thought that this was our best spot because I already knew a lot of the restaurant folks. I'd been here, I had friends and family here, and whenever you're talking about mental health in our industry, there's that negative stigma, like, ooh, don't don't talk about your feelings. And this is back in 20, this is pre-COVID too. Um, and I was like, well, we need trust. Trust is the biggest thing when talking about those items, and whatnot. What better of a place than Durango to do it? I already know a lot of folks. We can have that conversation, and so we just kind of were like, let's see if people are interested. And we started off with support groups, and we got up to 10 to 15 folks, which was pretty good for our size town. We're a town of 16,000 people. We are the third largest workforce in the county. But we had a good turnout and saw the need and wanted to grow and do more and provide more services. It's not only talking about your mental health, but your physical health and financial, social, all that. So we wanted to expand into that. And that was February 2019 when we started those groups. And then we applied for our nonprofit status in November 2019 and were approved in April, right when COVID hit. There is a month after we got shut down, basically. Um, and it was very bittersweet. And it was because of COVID, it kind of boosted us into what we need to do, what we wanted to do. Um, we're excited. We're so glad that we were around for it, for our community because it's so big here. Um, but yeah, so that's kind of where we started. My own personal. I ended up having to have back surgery a month before COVID shut down from restaurant work. Pretty much, I'd broken my back apparently 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and never took care of it because I didn't have health insurance and worked through the pain, and that eventually caught up with me and had to have surgery, and so it's not only your mental but your physical, and how much that influences your mental health as well. I mean, if you're in pain every day, you're probably not the greatest person to be around.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, that's our other big focus.
I mean, something that you said that you had that space for reflection when you went to the organization that did farm to table food, and you had that space for reflection, whereas the other scenario is pushing through the pain and we don't stop to think about what
Yeah,
we the pain, we just keep pushing through it. So it's such a that space for reflection, whether we provide it in terms of a thought that a question that makes someone think, or a group, a support group, or those spaces for reflection are so important in our industry. That's where even I think that that the fact that COVID came and we did have a lockdown, whatever length, it just made people think about, okay, this is what not working 24/7, almost 24/7 looks like, it feels like, and it just changes. I think when you have that experience of, okay, let me think about it.
yeah, and that's um, like one of the things we offer. We do these sensory deprivation tanks. There's a place in town, and we get 60-minute sessions with chefs, four chefs or restaurant staff, anybody in the restaurant. Um, but it's great because it's no light, no sound, and we're so used to so much stimulus all
Yeah.
day. It's as soon as you get to work, it's loud noises, it's bright lights, it's everything. And a lot of folks are like, dude, I don't want to go into that. I don't want to be alone with my thoughts. But we've found a lot of folks that they do it their first time, like, oh, okay, I'm going to give it the second time. They're like, that's amazing. It's amazing, and they end up going back multiple times. So um, that's part of that reflection part. And but yes, like you're saying, through COVID, that's what we've definitely seen. I've seen it more at the lower levels in the organizational chart of restaurants, kind of, the people that aren't in management roles for the most part. Um, they've definitely taken that transition. Like, nope, I'm only working these 4 days a week, and those other 3 days are mine, or 5 and 2, whatever they have decided since basically COVID, because they've recognized, buddies uh, that have been in it forever and haven't taken the time off. Like, I can feel my hands, like the burn scars, the I can feel in my fingertips again. And so recognizing those things that you've just buried or covered up every day and pushed aside. And that's, to say that's mostly those lower level management positions, whatever. I still see lots of chefs that are in charge, and they have that passion. They are so, like, they care about what they do so much that they are just still running themselves ragged. And we're trying to work with organizations, companies, like, hey, it pays to give your team some time. And we're seeing a lot of organizations doing that. There's a couple places that are closed down for a week or 2 weeks, paying their staff to take the time. They're starting to see that change. And I think now it's, you know, we're working on this hashtag restaurant neighbors campaign, and that's that public awareness piece. Is like, the companies want to provide these things. They want to provide the health insurance. They want to provide these benefits for their staff, but now they got to raise menu prices in order to do that. But also food costs is going up. So there's all these other plays going in, and so we need the public to support it as well and understand, hey, you might see larger prices, or you might see transitions, hours change, or whatever in a restaurant to accommodate their staff, and we ask you to support them in that transition, because that's what needs to happen. So
It's such a. I'm going to ask you more about that in the last question about that campaign, but it's so important that everyone gets a whole picture, and that's when the customers, I guess it's only the customers everyone's worried about. If we get their buy-in, then no one has an excuse almost, I'd like to say. I don't run
right,
a restaurant, but um it's yeah.
and that's like, as a server or bartender, especially the people that are dealing with the guests face to face, and how to uh, explain to them what's going on in a very positive manner, to not be sounding like a rude person or anything, like how do you do it in a very positive manner and get that buy-in from the guest, and that's I mentioned I was bar backing and bartending over the summer, and I still do it part-time. Uh, but housing has been an issue, and housing's been an issue everywhere in the U.S. I'm not sure in the other countries, but um, us being a tourist town, we've had a lot of people from California, Texas, all over buying up houses, and our workforce is losing places to live. Like it's just getting too expensive to live here and all that. And I had guests, some patrons at the bar who were in town, they're an older couple, and they were looking to buy their second or third home, and they're looking at Durango, and I was like, hey, like it's great to have you in our town, but like understand that this is what we're facing right now. Like, and I'm not saying don't buy a house here. I'm just saying if you do and you have the ability to support workforce housing or get involved in the community, and there's these like positive outlets, like you can still buy a house, but understand that there's also these struggles that are happening in our community, and you can help with that. If you're able to buy a second or third home,
Mhm.
we'd hope to have you involved in our community, and this is how you can do it. Da, 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 da. So there's always that fun way of like figuring out how to peacefully tell people to
Yeah, not making anyone
get that
wrong.
awareness. Yeah. So
Um, and I know you've answered the second question already. It was about how do you define a good work-life balance? Because I know you've said what it was like trying to strike a balance between your personal life and your time working in the industry. But do you have a definition as such for work-life balance?
um, it's hard, like, and that's for me what I recognized with that balance was my challenge was creating boundaries, um, and being able to have that like clear expectations with your employer, um, and yourself. For me as a chef, like I loved me and my executive chef, we built this crew, and I loved they were my family. Like you create a family, so many times in a restaurant, and I would go above and beyond for that team, but then I wouldn't have the energy for home, and that's where it was detrimental to my relationship. I would work with my team all day and talk with them. They would be going through something. We had the open door policy, like, hey, anything you want to talk about, whether it's about work or personal life, whatever, we're here to talk. And we would. And then I would get home, and my partner at the time, she'd be like, hey, we need to talk. Let's talk about what we're doing, where we're going, how you're feeling, da 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 da. I would just be like, I can't, I'm so exhausted. I just can't. I want to go to sleep. I just want to watch TV and not think, you know. Um, and at that time, whenever I was drinking heavily too, is my mantra was stop thinking, start drinking, and obviously not healthy. And so that was my biggest learning lesson out of that was like, hey, after that time that I spent away, it was like, all right, I need to set these boundaries. Whenever I went and became a sous chef again at another place, and guys would come to talk to me, I'd be like, all right, I'm down to talk, man. Do you need to talk right now, or can we set a time and set that time within my day? Like, hey, I got my prep list is huge, or I got this order to do, you know, and try to fit that into some kind of schedule, and have those boundaries and talk to them, and being open, and like I would love to right now. I do not have the capacity to do that at this moment. But when we talk to the sector chef, is there someone else that may have the time or the space to provide that for you? And that honesty and humility and openness, you know, I would see, at least in my experience, that I would get so much more from that team member. Like they would be so much more supportive. Be like, hey, yeah, totally. Like it's a 5 minute conversation, or I can wait till tomorrow, whatever. And we would and follow through. You'd always have to follow through, because if you just put it off, it's so many times just put off like, yeah, we'll talk tomorrow, and then you don't talk tomorrow, and then so following through on that commitment to that individual was huge. But then if I needed the time or needed to leave early or needed stuff to take care of at home or needed my own, they would respect that and support me in that decision. And that was huge. Um,
Mm. And as a
Creating that
leader,
teamwork.
sorry,
Oh
apologies.
no, just creating that teamwork. So
I was just saying, you're modeling as a leader, you're modeling that kind of openness and honesty and really being there for somebody, but also being mindful of your own needs. And that just changes everything when you model that.
yeah, and it's huge, and um, you know it's explaining to it's exactly it. Like you gotta stand by what you preach, and like, hey, you gotta take care of yourself before you can take care of anyone else, and that's what we're doing. So what do you need? What can I do to help you with that? And I think like what the hardest part about that, and for me, and for so many chefs, and for so many cooks and restaurant anybody in the staff is asking for help. It's so much like you have that like, nope, I got it, chef. I have this. I don't need any help. I can do it. You're constantly feeling like you need to prove yourself.
Yes.
And that was the first sous chef position. Me and my chef, we told ourselves like we're not going to be yelling chefs. We're not going to be the yelling guys. The ones that are constantly yelling. But over 5 years, I yelled probably 5 times, and those 5 times were more so because people weren't asking for help. you know, I was like, guys, this is harder now since you're not asking for help, and I think that it's so hard to get over that hump and understanding. And once they, once I would have someone get over that hump and see that they didn't get in trouble for asking for help or they weren't, it actually made them better. Once they finally understood that, it would just push our service to run so much more smoothly.
Wow.
And so that was the hardest thing with that, like whatever you're asking for that self-care, like it's a hard thing to ask for because it's been so long. Like, no, you don't get time off. Like holidays, I don't get time off. Why should you get time off? Um, so yeah, yep.
That says it all. The bottom line is there that the service would run smoother when, I mean, it just says everything about what direction we need to head in as an industry.
Yeah, there was one. I had a grill cook that I would literally have to take the spatulas away from him, and I would have everybody stop. It'd be Friday night in a rush, and we'd be in the weeds and just drowning in tickets, but everybody would be lost. You get so lost and seeing red, tunnel vision, and all that. And I would make everybody stop for 5 seconds, and we would breathe. I would just make everybody like, all right, in, out, and we'd breathe for 5 seconds, and then like, all right, this is where we're at, and go through, and then it would get right back on track. Uh, it was
Five
pretty amazing seeing that.
5 seconds is all you need. That
Right.
space. 5 seconds. Um, and how do you see the problem of work-life balance affecting hospitality with specific reference to your community at In the Weeds and how it affects them?
So we have had a lot of people leave the industry once they recognize, they're like, I can go make the same amount of money landscaping and I don't have to talk to anybody. I'm not stressed out. It's completely different. And so we have had a lot of people leave the industry. So that's a big focus is changing that. Like, hey, this is what these companies are offering and how you can still, enjoy yourself and giving you the right as an employee. Um, Higher turnover, folks, as soon as it's almost like the PTSD, as soon as they get into that craziness at a restaurant or they're being treated wrong, they're like, oh, I'm out, and they're hopping to another restaurant to find that right place, which, like I support that, like find the place that fits you and we work with folks like before they even start applying. Like, hey, let's get you into the spot so you're not finding a new job in 2 weeks or in a month or whatever. Um, Still self-medication. I mean, that's always been a thing. And this is, I would say that community effect, it's harder on that upper management because they've already invested so much of their time into an organization or to a company. And so it is harder for them to leave that, you know. They're going to have to start back at the bottom or whatever. So, you know, we've had that discussion. I've talked to chefs that would come to support groups and haven't since COVID, and they're like, dude, I'm scared to even talk about anything because if I do, it's going to open up the floodgates and I'm going to need to take a 5 day time off. Like, well, maybe you should, you know, but it's detrimental to the company. Like they need to be there. And it's, so um, that is some of that effect happening here. Um, but yeah, that's, the biggest part. And it's kind of similar to the other big, uh, like the bigger cities and what is going on. It's very similar to what's going on. Ours is either focused on that stress and it's being a seasonal town too. It's kind of everything's been turned upside down because we would start getting busy in May and then it would end in October. And it was almost like clockwork. Like you could guarantee, all right, we're gonna drop 50% in sales October 17th, you know. But with COVID, everybody's traveling a lot more, and they're able to work from home now, so they can work on the road, and our we don't know. It's been busy. We've had April is typically the lowest sales of the year, and a lot of restaurants hit record-breaking sales. Um, and the same is still happening. Talking to the chefs and other restaurant friends, like, yeah, we just broke another record, just breaking a record every day, you know. And like it's great, but I don't know if I should hire more
Yeah.
or stay, downsize because I'm not going to be able to give them hours in a week or whatever. And so it's just a lot of confusion and uh, not knowing where to go. You know,
Lots of added pressure on those running the businesses.
yeah. And so that's we're just trying to be there for, hey, what do you need? Like, what do you need right now? And how can we help? And, do you need to get outside? Do you have one day off this week that we can help you get some of that self-care tools in? So,
Wow, that sounds
um,
really valuable. Do you have any advice for hospitality professionals who want to work on their work-life balance or improve the quality of their lives?
um, so one thing that I found, especially like to prevent burnout, especially for me, was, so often it's like, I think it's a myth, like if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. Well, whenever it gets repetitive, it does turn to work, and then you lose the passion for it. Um, and that kind of gets back into those boundaries. Like, hey, take a step away from the menu, take a step away from food if you can, like, and try to find some other hobbies that are also creative. Uh, I've been doing like woodwork at home, and I'm still using my hands, and it's similar in a way, but it's not in a rush. You're taking your time, and you're being creative still, and so finding these, doing puzzles, whatever, you know, the friends I play with them because it's Dungeons and Dragons, like getting into a fantasy world, getting completely out of your world, but still being creative, and it opens up the brain. And I think those are great ways to be able to step back. And then I find, especially if I'm going through like a problem with the menu or why this dish isn't selling or presentation, whatever, find it refreshing, like coming back with a new viewpoint of
Yeah.
this and kind of giving it a second, you know, um, and just letting it be how it is. Um, so that's one. Yeah, physical health. That's another huge. Just obviously for the back, I take care of your ears. Um, that's I didn't recognize until COVID, once I was at home working at home for a while, for a month. Like there's this constant ringing always, and find out that I have tinnitus. And
Oh,
I wasn't used to it because I was so used to being in loud areas
yeah.
every day. And so that's one of those like, oh, should have taken care of my ears better, and that's a hard one too in the kitchen. But there's definitely ways around that. Light earplugs at least to muffle sounds. But um, so yeah, physical health and getting creative, finding the resource. It's again back to the ask for help. There's multiple themes that I come back to, but that's if you need help, and that's not just like within your mental health, but uh, buying a house, whatever. We have a great nonprofit here that does grant programs for lower income individuals, and this is like not below poverty level, but what chefs are typically making, 35 to $60,000 a year, and they support you in down payment assistance. I was able to buy a house here in Colorado that I wouldn't have ever been able to buy. This was maybe if I'm retired, or once I retire, I'll be able to buy a house. I'll have enough money saved up. But through this program, they were able to help me. It's things like that. If you want to get on top of something that seems that you can't reach, there's a lot of resources out there, and finding those. So, and having organizations to help you find those.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Because
health
it's,
departments are great spots. So,
yeah. uh, Sorry, I was just thinking, asking for help, as you said, is like unless you ask, you don't know what's out there. It's almost like just that first step leads you to
yeah,
someone who might know a resource or an organization that can help. It's so important. It's such a small thing, but asking for help is just everything.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And that's getting that statement. It's not weak. Uh, it's not you're going to lose your masculinity or anything. I mean, it takes courage to ask for help. So really, it's makes you stronger as a person.
Yeah.
So, um, and confidence and not having confidence. That's like that kind of like knowing that you don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And that's especially for me jumping in a nonprofit world. I had no experience in the past of this. It was all chefs and everything. So whenever I'm talking to nonprofit professionals, they're like, "So how do you do this?" I'm like, "Man, I am learning. I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, teach me, please. Tell me how to do this. I want to do this all the right way and the correct way. So please show me." Um, and I was somewhat fortunate to learn that at a young age in construction. I always feel like restaurant folks either work construction and then restaurants, or restaurants and then construction. But if you mess something up, it could be hurting someone. A wall could fall down. Is such a big thing. And given I wasn't being told with compassion to ask for help, but it was it was the Southern culture, good old boys that I was working with. And like, if you don't ask for help, you're going down. You're dead meat. And so that really did teach me like, hey, ask because it can end up in someone getting hurt or whatnot, or having to start over somewhere. So
Yeah, it's we think in such detail about how someone experiences the food we cook and what it's going to taste like and what flavors they're going to taste and how it's going to make them imagine their childhood or a trip or something abroad. But our own feelings and our own needs are just like pushed through pain and just push everything down.
yeah, yeah,
It's just the last thing we want to look at.
right.
Do you have any suggestions for employers that they can do to support the work-life balance of their staff?
Yeah, I mean, there's obvious the obvious things, the if they can, the benefits, the health insurance, those
Yeah.
types of things. Those are kind of all obvious, and sometimes they're unattainable for small, especially smaller businesses. But it comes back to that communication, having that open door policy, but also reminding for yourself to set those boundaries and have a time, have a day where it's like, all right, this is my individual discussion day with staff and team. I think that can be huge. Or having your management teams, having those different levels of communication, and it's also a great opportunity to teach, new management opportunities. Like, hey, start chatting with our team and come back to me because they might be more comfortable talking with you since you're in the trenches with them. Um, Getting creative on those fronts and letting folks know, like, hey, you're not going to be reprimanded by, letting me have it or whatever. I think that's huge because sometimes people need to vent in order to find out what the actual problem is. And then only then you can find a solution. You got to know the problem first before you can find a solution. And especially whenever I was sous chef, and a lot of times it came down to he kept leaving his towel on my station. It was something small like that that would just like and blow up into this big thing. And so I think that's huge. If you don't have, or, I mean, even if you are offering the benefits, I think it's communication, and that's just a huge part of it. Pay, there's all these things. I've worked at places that had a lot of communication and no pay or benefits, and it was very toxic, or they had all the pay and all the benefits, but no communication is very toxic. So I think you gotta try and get something in there together, but and then also supporting their staff, backing their staff. Uh, there's I was back home in Arkansas. I really liked this on my buddy's restaurant. It was, you know, masks are not mandatory, but being nice to our staff is. And that was on their front door, like big letters right there. And I was like, all right, I like that, and that kind of teases the people that might not be wanting to wear the mask, but they, if you're not going to be kind to our staff, you're out of here. And that's the bar I was working at over the summer. It's, if you had anybody unruly treating you unkindly, like our business was, it's a long time bar in town. It was a dive bar. Their business is good. They're never going to be slow. And the owner's like, yeah, no, kick them out. I don't care. They say one word to you that's offensive or whatever. Like, I have your back all the way, so we don't need them. Um, and I think that helps with your turnover. And that brings more people in too once they see that the ownership is supporting their team, supporting their staff, uh, the guests that you want to be there, your patrons that you want will come more or bring more friends and family and build your business. It takes time, but it's not allowing a toxic culture to exist is huge, because we're already trying to transition out of that toxicity. Um, so yeah, I think those are easier. It's a non-monetary style of doing things, that can really help with your teams and your crews and being able to hear them. I think that was the biggest thing. So, and also being honest to yourself with them and like, hey, this is what I'm going through. You know, this is what we're having to pay for this week, or we had this big thing that cut out half of our sales. Like we had to take this money to do this or that, and so I'm not saying you have to be a full on open book, but I think giving some of that out there as well uh,
Yeah.
will help.
Definitely. It's just, as you say, it's like these are very lots of low hanging fruit options that anyone can start with wherever they are, even if budget is not you know it doesn't allow for any more bigger measures.
Right.
It's something that really opens the door and has people feeling happy to be working where you work, where they work.
Right.
Totally. I think that leads very nicely to the last question, where I wanted to ask you, how can members of the Love Letters to Chefs community find In the Weeds, and also the Restaurant Neighbors campaign, which you are going to launch next year? I guess it'll be next year.
Yep. Yep. We've kind of already started it a little bit, kind of in our local community, but I think we're working with the Mental Health and Hospitality Coalition and everybody there. Uh, I think we're waiting for the holidays to finish up for sure. Uh, but yeah, so In the Weeds, we're online at In the Weeds Co, as in Colorado, .org. So intheweedsco.org, or our Instagram is at intheweeds_co, and Facebook is at In the Weeds Co. Um, we're not on Twitter or anything, but yeah, the restaurant neighbors, we will have a page on our website. I think we'll also have it kind of throughout our other coalition members' websites of just like what that is, how people can get involved, and just supporting. A lot of it's just awareness and being aware and being kind, and that's tipping. Tipping is always an answer, but also tipping the back house, going back and giving the kitchen, and $5 or $10, whatever. Like, I think that's huge. Restaurants have started doing that, adding tip the kitchen on the menus, and I think that's a huge thing because it shares that, it creates the buy-in, and helps that rivalry between the back of house and front of house. Um, so getting them involved, I mean, that's you can often feel isolated in the kitchen, and working with them. That's every time we get a positive compliment from a guest coming up to the window on the line, or a tip from someone like a server, if they, hey, table 33 wanted to give you all $15 specifically because their food was amazing and they understand what, whatever. I would see an immediate turn, like the production would just go so much better after. Like, yes, something positive. So, um, but yeah, so our website, we just revamped it a bit, and that has a lot of information on what we do, how you can get involved, whether you're in our area or not. We work obviously with the coalition and Chow. So, but yeah, I think that is all.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving your time. And I will include links to your website below the
Sweet.
video description.